Hi, everybody. Welcome to a very, very special edition of the Casino Business Podcast. I've got two guests today, two experts in their field. We're going to talk about implementing new systems. I haven't heard a comprehensive podcast on this in the casino space. I'm excited to really talk to Juan James Okamash, slot director of Desert Diamond for Southern Arizona. James, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Craig. It's great to be here to talk about this product. So appreciate it. Thank you.
And we got Juan Romero, a repeat guest. It's been a while, but a frequent guest of the Casino Business Podcast. Juan, CEO of Volante Software.
Yeah, thanks, Craig. Appreciate it. It's been a minute, so it's good to have you and James on here, and we can maybe shed a little bit more light on this topic from both an operator and a provider perspective. So I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Perfect. Well, what we're talking about today is implementing new software. And what we'll start with is like, how as an operator, you decide whether or not it's worth making an investment. You have limited budget, but seemingly unlimited problems or areas to improve. And then we'll get into that implementation phase. How do you make sure it's successful? Because I've heard varying numbers, but there's some numbers out there that like 30% of all software spend goes unused because people buy it with the best intentions and it just sits on the shelf and never gets properly implemented. So we're going to talk about that decision, and then how do you actually make sure it's a successful implementation. And the reason you two are the guests on here is because, one, you're obviously an example of a very successful implementation with Slot Track at Desert Diamond. So we'll talk about that, but we'll talk about generalities as well. So James, maybe first you can tell us a little bit about Desert Diamond and kind of the scope of the slot operation there.
So we have 3 properties in Desert Diamond in Southern Arizona, Tucson. We have Sahuarita and Y. And so between the 3 properties, we have about 2,000 games, 40 of which are Class 2.
Nice. Okay. And so again, like kind of recapping that intro, obviously that's a good size, I guess, universe of games. You've got a big operation, you've got a budget, and there's probably a million different areas like, oh man, this could be better, this could be better, but you've got a limited budget. So you have to be selective about where you're going to invest, whether it's a new system, a new hire. So how do you, when it comes specifically to a new product, like not a slot machine, but a new like service like Volante or something else, how do you decide, all right, I'm going to invest in a product to solve this problem versus try to train the team or try to hire another person? How do you make that decision?
I think one of the biggest things that we've come to really know in this modern way of managing enterprises is really streamlining operations and looking for opportunities to reduce labor and increase and optimize our processes. And so one of the biggest, being in a casino environment, the most important thing is the integrity of our data and making sure that our data is accurate for regulatory purposes and streamlining and optimization and for revenue generation. So, when we look at different software programs or software applications that, we would like to acquire, we look at something that is different than what we've seen before. And we look at things that are growing, something that kind of takes us into the modern day approach of really, maintaining data. I call it data integrity. So, and we look at what challenges we have. A lot of time, people want to increase manpower and kind of increase labor to take care of a problem, and that doesn't always work. So what we believe in here in Southern Arizona really is to, streamlining processes makes all of our jobs much easier and the data much stronger. So, we've seen over the past, the mismanagement of inventory was a huge challenge for us. Having games go out of service or a button panel break or a monitor go down or a CPU not available, our games are down for X number of days while we try to get overnight shipping, while we try to get our internal accounting processes to the point where we can acquire the part. And there's a lot of kind of hoops to go through when you're trying to rush things, and then there's errors and mistakes that can be made. parts became maybe possibly even unavailable, or there's a wait time, or there's a back order on certain parts. So, in order to kind of resolve those challenges, we needed to kind of have a system that would really help us manage our inventory. Not a spreadsheet, not something that we kind of knew, what we had available, but a piece of software that could help us understand how much inventory was necessary to go in our inventory room. We don't have an unlimited warehouse of space available for everything. We don't have an unlimited budget for everything. So we wanted to make sure that we had the right components available. We needed to, in order to do that, we needed to know our floor better than we've ever known it before. What parts are breaking down? What parts are most in demand? What parts have the most delay in getting here, when we need them? What parts do we need to have on hand for all manufacturers? And so, by having a system that could tell us, to get those answers for us quickly, we needed something that was different than what we've seen in the past. And so, that was just one component of this. So inventory management was vital to be able to help us reduce the amount of revenue generation loss from games being out of service. And so by doing that, we don't need 2 or 3 more techs. What we need is the parts here in order to make sure that those parts could be put in the quickest amount of time.
So that makes total sense. So you saw, and I think a lot of that's directed at the problems that SlotTrack solves. Now, did you, I guess, backing up a little bit, was this something that these issues, hey, we got parts, these machines are offline, was this a problem that you're like, we have to solve? And then you went out and you found Volante and maybe you evaluate against other tools? Or was it something where it's the vendor, in this case, reached out and then they presented these problems and you're like, oh my gosh, those are big problems. And then that got the ball rolling. Do you remember? Because I think a lot of people on the vendor side are curious about that. How often is it, I've got this fire and I'm going to find a solution, or they reached out and you're like, you know what? Actually, now you present that, I didn't even know this was an option. So maybe if you can remember, like, what started that process?
Yeah. I mean, the process started with, a simple issue with inventory. We had a machine down. I had just started maybe a few weeks prior to that. We had a machine down, and we had, they came into my office. I needed to get a part overnighted. And, so we signed the paperwork, and that part actually didn't, get through our finance department for, a couple of days. So once that went out, it went out to the vendor. And then, we waited, for that part to come on. In the meantime, somebody was strolling in the lab and found, a pile of components sitting there, one of which was the component that we needed. And so it was kind of, in a stack of inventory. It was in an area where nobody even knew it was there. And so somebody in the past had purchased some inventory and put it in the corner and lost track of it. And so, in my previous experience, in managing that inventory was an important aspect of what, I consider like my job. I want to make sure that I have a process so that we're managing, the inventory for, hundreds of millions of dollars worth of revenue that's generated in these properties. So, we need to make sure that we don't have parts laying in a corner somewhere that could be good or they could be bad. So that's kind of started the process off here at Desert Diamond, where there was not an inventory management system that we had access to. So we started kind of looking around for, systems that would resolve that issue. One, I ran into, I had used a previous software system in a previous, position. And that's kind of what I was looking for. I was looking for that system. I was reaching out to them to see if, I could get some information on, their software here for Desert Diamond. And in the meantime, while I was looking for that contact, I ran into Volante. And so I online, and I started reading a little bit about what they did. And, it was a company that was growing, seemed very innovative, seemed very kind of anxious to, kind of tackle some of the industry's challenges that we've all seen over the years. And I reached out to them, and, we started talking about, what Volante could do. And they actually kind of provided me, opportunities in other areas that I hadn't even been looking for at that point. Eventually we would have gotten into some of those areas, but really just like a forward thinking company that really kind of looked to the industry and, we all have challenges. We all kind of work around those challenges, but Juan and his team were able to provide me some of the technological insights to the innovation, the software that they were developing to kind of tackle these problems that we've all been having in the industry in a different methodology, using software, using operative processes, along with that software that they were developing to be able to manage and optimize, these challenges that we've all faced on a day-to-day basis. And that comes down to the inventory management, which was a more robust inventory management tool than what I've seen before. It really, it's done an amazing, it's been an amazing change. We've had this software now for almost 4 years. We've had, it took us, a couple of years to really, get to where we needed to be, but we put the resources in place to make it happen. And, we've been able to, we don't even realize how good this system is anymore because we just take it for granted that it's almost like it's always been in place. We're really streamlined. So when we start hearing other operators talking about, how do you keep track of, your costs when you're fixing and repairing parts, it's just a natural process for us. We just do that. Now the system allows us to keep track of that. The system allows us to, how do you know how many parts that you need, or do you have them as an inventory? We just do. It's something that's really just kind of built into our operation now. Our team is more aware. Our team is more savvy. They really enjoy using this new process, this new tool, and they don't even realize how amazing it is to be able to grab their computer and look and see, where that part is, go get it off the shelf, put it in the machine, and then to be able to track the last parts that were put into that machine and what those costs were. And so, it's a really sophisticated process, that Juan and his team have been able to develop for us to utilize internally. And that's only one of the 4 that we have currently.
Are utilizing. To kind of jump on what you're saying or asking about, Craig, is like we run into these same problems all over the place, right? And it's kind of like it's all about scale, right? So you have some really big properties, and then you have your middle of the road, and then you have kind of some smaller properties, but they're all doing the same thing, right? The goal there is to keep these games up and running as much as possible, maximize that amount of time. They're trying to make, create as many efficiencies as they can, and really to make that dollar go as far as you can, right? Because the more money that we can allocate towards new games or product by taking that from, inefficient things or by maximizing the process, the more you're going to come out ahead, right? And so we've seen it both ways where I think, like with James, he was looking to solve a very specific problem. Unfortunately, we intersected at the right time, right? There's other people, to your point, where we've spoken to them and they don't know that those things are problems necessarily, right? Because of jurisdictional issues or the way that they've operated doesn't always encompass or bring that into their purview. So it's kind of like this 50-50 mashup of, people actively looking for things and then other people who are just kind of, presented with the information and they go, oh, we can use that. And then to what James was kind of, talking about here at the end is what's crazy is how many of these things are interlinked. And we get that all the time. It's like, well, you did this with this, facet in inventory. Can you do it for this process? And you're like, oh yeah, it's a grid with records and someone does something and change. Yeah, we can do that. And before you know it, we have a new module that was, a collaboration between somebody who just said, man, I have a problem. And all they needed was a willing, person on the other side where there's a market fit to be able to go, yeah, we can do that. And, Craig, this from our conversations, we're able, like, I don't think there's one piece of functionality that we offer that is only for one property. Everyone has either repurposed that or used it or customized it because they all have the same issues.
We've been able to take that information from what Juan was talking about, and I talked about a little bit, but we've been able to take the information and really, justify how much inventory budget dollars do we need. We've been able to kind of take and reduce those amounts just because of the ability to repair parts, taking parts and repairing them and putting them back on the shelf. We've been able to streamline our technical, staffing just based on the ease of getting a part, having a part available, putting those parts in a machine. And we've been able to track how much loss, reduced loss that we've been able to, see on the floor due to games not being out of service. We can track if a part's not available, what those days out of service would be versus if that part was available. and the tech was available. So it not only helps us justify our budget dollars, it also helps us justify the resources that we need on our shifts in order to kind of get those games back into service in the quickest amount of time. So there's so many different avenues that we could take. It's just not about managing the inventory. It's about really kind of streamlining those processes throughout the enterprise and throughout the department here, so that we can maximize our revenue and actually keep our games going. I mean, we have average here at Desert Diamond, we have an average of 1 to 2 games out of service at any given time. I mean, we're really, having those parts available, having our techs understand, kind of where those parts are at, how to get them in place. And, it's really rare to have, such a low number of games out of service at any given time. So, but we really focus, on that aspect of our operations, keeping the parts available, keeping our techs active on the floor, keeping our techs aware of what's going on. They're a part of the process. They've been a part of the process from day one, and then keeping those games up and operational.
And so you mentioned a few different things that you're tracking. You're like, one is games out of service. It sounds like that's gone way down, which is good. And then a few different areas. Are these things that you knew going in, all right, we're going to buy this, and these are the things we're going to track, and if these improve, we know this was a good purchase decision? Or was that something that maybe Juan helped you with? Because Juan, what's going to go well, and you kind of point to different KPIs? Or how do you, I guess, measure the success of a new product that you're implementing?
I think you start out with a problem. We start out, and we can identify those problems through experience. And then all of a sudden, you as you're solving those problems, there's other areas of opportunities that you realize, because, we were out to solve an inventory system. We were out to solve kind of organizing our inventory so that we could make sure that we had inventory on hand. We knew where it was to get out onto the machine. But by doing that, and I think that's what makes, Juan and his team so, valuable in this industry, is that by doing that, we start talking about other areas of opportunities, that we can kind of utilize. If we have that information available, there's so many other things that we can resolve and help streamline that we didn't even think about. So as, we get together and we have these conversations, there's 10 more things that we want to dive into, to help us streamline and get, even better than what we are right now with the current application. So having these conversations, thinking outside of the box, thinking about the future, thinking about all the challenges that we not only had, but thinking about opportunities, the challenges that we didn't even realize we had, in resolving those. And so, I mean, that's the I think the most important piece of this is that the innovative nature and thinking process of these guys and us kind of, as operators coming to the table to talk, we have these discussions that, we're already thinking of years ahead of things that are possible, with the information that we have.
Yeah, and I think, Craig, that I think everyone has in their head what those KPIs are, right? I mean, there's a very surface level, general knowledge for what's going to save you money and where you can cut things and where you can make things up. And I think operators have we're such a data driven industry that's already implanted in like basically everything they do. The thing that's been interesting is what James says. Like, from my perspective, it's twofold. One being that I constantly have to be like, we're having these conversations. It's like, all right, let's go do X, Y, Z on top of this. And you're like, well, that's cool, but we haven't maximized ABC yet. So let's maximize that, and then we'll go here. And, that's a great part of it, is like, how do we take kind of the whole thing and implement the whole thing to not only knock out these KPIs, but like, as James was saying, I've had to create so many dashboards for James, right? But that's a good problem to have, because he'll tell me, like, these are the KPIs I had in mind. All right, cool, we got those. I went and had these 3 or 4 meetings and made these decisions. You know what? I need to take this further in this direction, or I need to now look at it in this entirely different way, which maybe he did or didn't have in his head, right? And so, like James said, it's that back and forth. The KPIs naturally evolve over time. The more the system they use, the more data we produce, and the more faith that he has in that data being accurate, those KPIs are going to evolve and change.
Yeah, and I think that it's important too. Like, it always doesn't go in a straight line. Like, we didn't do this and this, that we went sideways. we try to do a couple of things that, that I think were important at the time, but they created new avenues of opportunities, even though that maybe one or two things, they went to a dead end, but they created other opportunities that we dove into that were even better than our first thought.
Now, when you decide to purchase a new solution, I guess in the sales process, everything, oh, this is going to be great, it's going to solve all these problems, and then sign the dotted line, and then implementation comes. And that's where the rubber meets the road, and that's where a lot of challenges start, because for most tools, you're going to need the ground level, the frontline employees to actually use the tool. And there's a lot of different personalities, a lot of different appetites for learning new things. So how do you, I guess one more question in the evaluation process, how do you, like when you're buying something, how much do you think through like, oh gosh, this is going to be tough to get them to use, even though it's a great tool, it's going to be tough. How do you think through that? And then the second part is, I guess when you decide to purchase it, how do you roll it out to your team? And I think it's a good question for both of you, because Juan, I know you put a lot of thought into your go lives and making those as smoothly as possible. So maybe James first, and then Juan, you could talk through on your side how you guys think about making that process as smooth as possible and make adoption as high as possible.
Yeah, I think the first thing that really comes into mind with us is we have an amazing team here. I think everyone believes that there's opportunities to improve, and so right from every key position that we have, our technical manager, our operational managers, our assistant managers, our shift managers, our supervisor, our tech supervisors, everyone was brought into these discussions early on, and they were able to share ideas. We didn't just throw this thing out to them and say, go use it. We had early on discussions with our team. And so, and also with Juan, we brought them in for kind of overviews, demos, kind of insights. We had an opportunity to share ideas, share thoughts, and at that time there's a lot of, that won't work. And, no, it's going to double my work. It's going to do this. It's not going to be easy. And so I think once you work through the adversity of kind of something new, when you work through, at first, the first instinct is to, it's not going to work. We do things this way. It's never going to be able to do that. Once you get through that process, that thought process or that roadblock, and you go on and you get over to the other side, it opens up so many key opportunities. And so, I want to share a little bit about where my team's mind's at right now with all of this, but I also want to answer the second part of your question is, how do you get, the team members to really buy into that? We share data with them. We make sure that they have the access that they need. They use the tool. They're not just using the tool to get me data. They're actually using the tool themselves to go get that inventory that's on hand, to get pricing of that inventory, to set up game configurations. They have all the information at their fingertips that they would have had to have a book, a printed 400-page par sheet in their hands previously. And they actually use the data, the tool just as much as I do. So everyone has a stake in all this to make sure that it's accurate and that we're all using it, because there's nothing worse than going back in the inventory room and finding out that part that it was sitting at and one shelf 1A is not there, and they start pointing fingers at each other, and it's like we're holding ourselves accountable. Our supervisors and our techs are holding them accountable, and they're just amazing. Like they're a great team. They're very, very good at following through with things. They just don't kind of like use it for a day or two and leave it behind. This is an amazing team, and everyone believes in innovation. They all believe in opportunities, and they all believe in technology, and they want to make this tool, the best, give it the best use, right? And I think that another key factor in all of this, and then I'll let Juan talk, but the key factor of this is that something that Juan and his team has done that nobody else in the industry has done, and that's allow us to set goals for ourselves. What are our goals? How do we want to use the system? Like, what is your goals for the next 6 months or a year? And, and then we write those goals on, we talk about them, and they're not set off on a shelf somewhere to wait. Juan and his team, we set up monthly meetings and we talk about where we're at in those goals. And if we're not there, how do we get there? What do we need to do? What do we need to do differently? Do we need to kind of, get some more involvement? Do we need more training? Do we need something else that can assist us with, getting you to that goal? So I think that they care more or as much about our success as we do. And so, and they're diligent about that. They make sure, with 100% certainty that they track those goals, they track our progress, and they get us to those goals. And then when we get there, what's next? What is it that this year is going to bring? What do you hope to accomplish this year? What are your next, goals? And then we continue to meet. So I think it's that their, kind of their engagement in our success is a key factor in our success. They keep pushing us forward. Like, we want to be successful, but we also don't want to, have, Juan and his teams set a goal and then we're not doing it. Like, we're honest with each other. Like, what can we do? What is our potential? And we're honest with where we're at, because, that's what makes us continue to grow. We keep looking forward.
Yeah, and there's, it's so interesting to hear this from the other. I mean, we know it because we work with James and other teams so closely, right? But it's always interesting to see, and I constantly have to kind of go back and forth with my staff, right? On the sales perspective, they get frustrated sometimes because, the reality of the situation is there's some properties where the operational hurdles are too large, right? And the salesperson is going, why can't I get this done? Like, they need it, they know they need it. What's the holdup? And my thing to that is they're just not ready for it. There's so many other things that are happening in our world. Slot track is everything. It's like 1% of 1/5 of what James does on a daily basis, right? So it's like we have to kind of reframe our expectations as to, and put ourselves in their shoes, right? We got 300 people, we got 5,000 people that they're managing, in addition to all these slot machines and generating all this revenue, and you've got all these customers coming in, and it's like, all right, we got to reframe that. We got to make the most of our time with them. And I think what James has done a great job of is, what he talked about earlier is he's empowered his people. He's empowered his people and made the system and the data accessible, right? And when you do that, you've given them utility to the system. So yeah, it's always a little bit burdensome, particularly at the front end of things, right? But as they get rolling and they go like, oh, and James knows this, we have these conversations with this whole team on a monthly basis, like you said, and we'll have someone go, well, I didn't know I could do that. Well, I can just do this now. And, it just clicks for them. And now they're like, boom, that spreadsheet is dead to me. It's gone. Now I just do it here. Right. And then we have this level of refinement over the course of months or years or whatever the case may be. But when they see that utility, it's no longer an obstacle. And what's kind of good about that is when you have this back of house where you have these experts and they're trying to do their jobs as efficiently as possible, they've been empowered, and now you get 70% of them. The other 30, it's hard for them to hold out, because they're going to feel that pressure to perform and to take advantage of the tool the same way. And so we kind of see this kind of, I wouldn't call it self-policing, but this momentum internally where people start to go, well, Craig's been doing it and I didn't really want to do it, but he seems to be doing things a lot faster now, and maybe I'm going to try it. And then they get in there, and a lot of times you don't have to have that strong arm accountability, because when you roll it out that way, people see utility in it. So that's part of it. From our perspective, the biggest thing is, and where I think we've done a pretty decent job, is we understand what James and them are actually trying to do, right? There's nothing that I hated more when I worked in the casino and I was the one buying the software, for Craig to tell me, oh, yeah, it does contracts. Or yeah, it does, right? And then we come, oh, yeah, we just bought contracts. That's so cool. Then we come on site to deploy it, and we're sitting there with the end user, goes, no, it doesn't work like that. What do you mean it doesn't work like that? You just told me that you do contracts. Yeah, but not the way that they do it, right? So a big part of what we do early on in the beginning phases is really on a process level, understanding what it is when James says we need contract management, because that can mean 10 things to 10 different properties, right? And so I don't want to ever get on site and them go, well, we can't use this, or we don't do that. We need to be experts in who the players are, what exactly their pain points are, and what the processes look like in order to match the tool to the exact need, right? And then Once that's been done and the product is in, James and his team are taking over, making sure it's being used properly. And then from our perspective, it's like what James said is, how do we set the goals that make sense for them, right? And then how do we continually look at that and have accountability on both ends? So for me to sit here and go, James is using 100% of all four of his modules, I can tell you that, and I can show that to you on paper, what that looks like and what that means. And so when you circle back to our first conversation, it's like, what does that mean from a justification and from a pricing standpoint? You think he's not going to get more resources when he can demonstrate exactly, when I spend $1, here's the net effect of that dollar coming back to us as an operation. And I think all those things and all those moving parts, if you find the right provider, if you find the right operation and they have their head, looking forward, like James said, things can really come together. And it's that accountability on both ends, because just as much as we have those meetings to talk about, are we hitting James's goal? My staff has their accountability laid out in there as well. So is James not moving forward because my staff isn't getting something that he needs, right? We have a couple of his goals that are on hold right now because I owe him stuff in a contract module in order for him to put it in. That's on me and my team to get that done. We're holding him up now. And I think, my team stresses out about that just as much as, probably more than his, right? So it's that visibility that I think really takes it to the next level.
Yeah.
Well, I think there's probably going to be some casino operators listening to this thinking, I wish I had a relationship with my vendor like James and Juan have, because it sounds like a great synergistic relationship where you guys really driving each other to be better. And that's awesome. That's inspiring. I know we're probably, I feel like we could go another hour because I've got a lot of questions. I mean, maybe we can do this again sometime, because I'd love to dive more into the buying process and hearing how, from an operator perspective, how you like to buy, because there's so many different people that are selling things that have no idea what the mind of an operator is like. So maybe that's a future topic. But I think we covered a lot of topics on like how to make a successful implementation, how to make sure like there's adoption and follow through, and then I like what you're talking about with the goal setting and the constant meetings to make sure that you guys are on track and in sync. So awesome. I learned a ton. I think a lot of listeners will.
So
Juan and James,
we can't let you off that easy. You sell software too. So what are your thoughts on everything we just pontificated about for the last 40 minutes?
Hey, I think I can learn a lot from you, and I did.
Oh, this guy with flattery all the time.
No, that's for a different podcast. I mean, we sell URComped, we sell player acquisition, and so it's similar in a lot of ways. It's like getting the feedback of what kind of players are you looking for and working together to make compelling offers. But it's different in the sense that we don't have full control over the deliverable, which is the player. So a lot of it overlaps, but some of it doesn't. So I did, again, I'm genuinely, I learned a lot, and I think it's especially the parts about the monthly meetings, setting goals together, and making sure that you guys are aligned. Where if James is successful, they're hitting their goals. That means obviously they're using your tool, and your tool it's So, and it's tailoring I guess those behaviors to the strengths of your tool, where it's like, all right, these are going to be the goals. You're not going to set up goals where it's not conducive to Volante. I mean, you guys do everything you need, but I just think it's smart from a vendor perspective and smart from an operator as well to get the team's buy-in on all those goals.
And
so
I think it's really
kudos to both of you.
Like, and I know, again, this is a topic for the next one, but what you're doing as well is looking now more towards the land-based stuff and kind of talking about how can you take this business that you've been very successful for on the cruise side and bring that into the other route, realm of gaming. Because, I mean, that's a whole new segment and a whole new market, right? And so you're doing a lot of the same things and encountering a lot of the same things that James and I are too, because that's an innovative thing that maybe hasn't been done before. And so, yeah, man, I think there's a lot for you to add on the next one too.
Well, let's get on the books. We'll do another. This has been super insightful. How can, if somebody's listening in, they want to, learn more, they've got questions for both of you. How can they get a hold of you? Juan, you
Yeah,
first.
LinkedIn is always the best. You can look us up, Volante Software, and send us a message there. That's always the best for us.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm also on LinkedIn, and I like to, I'm proud to kind of know, how far we've come, and what types of, what this tool has helped us accomplish, and continue to accomplish. And so, I'm always happy to talk to people about kind of how we do things and how we got to the point where we are, what efforts that we have to put forth and all that. So I'm always happy to talk about, the product and what we've done, and, as how it continues to help us move forward. So, but yeah, I'm definitely happy to talk to anyone who has questions.
Awesome. Well, hey, thank you both. We'll definitely do this again sometime soon. And
thanks, guys.
Till next time. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.